LETTER XII. Of the Backwoods of Canada, by Catharine Parr Traill. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Backwoods of Canada, by Catharine Parr Traill. Letter XII. A Logging Bee. November the 2nd, 1833. Many thanks, my dearest Mother, for the contents of the box which arrived in August. I was charmed with the pretty caps and worked frocks sent for my baby. The little fellow looks delightfully in his new robes, and I can almost fancy is conscious of the accession to his wardrobe, so proud he seems of his dress. He grows fat and lively, and, as you may easily suppose, is at once the pride and delight of his foolish mother's heart. His father, who loves him as much as I do myself, often laughs at my fondness, and asks me if I do not think him the ninth wonder of the world. He has fitted up a sort of rude carriage on the hand sleigh for the little fellow, nothing better than a tea chest, lined with a black bearskin, and in this humble equipage he enjoys many a pleasant ride over the frozen ground. Nothing could have happened more opportunely for us than the acquisition of my uncle's legacy, as it has enabled us to make some useful additions to our farm, for which we must have waited a few years. We have laid out a part of the property in purchasing a fine lot of land adjoining our home lot. The quality of our new purchase is excellent, and from its situation greatly enhances the value of the whole property. We had a glorious burning this summer after the ground was all logged up, that is, all the large timbers chopped into lengths, and drawn together in heaps with oxen. To effect this the more readily, we called a logging bee. We had a number of settlers attend, with yokes of oxen and men to assist us. After that was over, my husband, with a men servant, set the heaps on fire, and a magnificent sight it was to see such a conflagration all round us. I was a little nervous at first on account of the nearness of some of the log heaps to the house, but care is always taken to fire them with the wind blowing in a direction away from the building. Accidents have sometimes happened, but they are of rarer occurrence than might be expected, when we consider the subtlety and destructiveness of the element employed on the occasion. If the weather be very dry and a brisk wind blowing, the work of destruction proceeds with astonishing rapidity. Sometimes the fire will communicate with the forest, and run over many hundreds of acres. This is not considered favourable for clearing, as it destroys the underbrush and light timbers, which are almost indispensable for ensuring a good burning. It is, however, a magnificent sight to see the blazing trees, and watch the awful progress of the conflagration, as it hurries onward, consuming all before it, or leaving such scorching mementoes as have blasted the forest growth for years. When the ground is very dry, the fire will run all over the fallow, consuming the dry leaves, sticks, and roots. Of a night the effect is more evident. Sometimes the wind blows particles of the burning fuel into the hollow pines and tall decaying stumps. These readily ignite, and after a time present an appearance that is exceedingly fine and fanciful. Fiery columns, the bases of which are hidden by the dense smoke wreaths, are to be seen in every direction, sending up showers of sparks that are whirled about like rockets and fire wheels in the wind. Some of these tall stumps, when the fire has reached the summit, look like gas lamp posts newly lit. The fire will sometimes continue unextinguished for days. After the burning is over, the brands are collected and drawn together again to be reburnt; and, strange as it may appear to you, there is no work that is more interesting and exciting than that of tending the log heaps, rousing up the dying flames and closing them in, and supplying the fires with fresh fuel. There are always two burnings: first, the brush heaps, which have lain during the winter till the drying winds and hot suns of April and May have rendered them sere, are set fire to. This is previous to forming the log heaps. If the season be dry and a brisk wind abroad, much of the lighter timber is consumed, and the larger trees reduced during this first burning. After this is over, the rest is chopped up and logged for the second burning. And lastly, the remnants are collected and consumed till the ground be perfectly free from all encumbrances, excepting the standing stumps, which rarely burn out, and remain eyesores for several years. The ashes are then scattered abroad, and the field fenced in with split timber. The great work of clearing is over. Our crops this year are oats, corn, and pumpkins, and potatoes, with some turnips. We shall have wheat, rye, oats, potatoes, and corn next harvest, which will enable us to increase our stock. At present we have only a yoke of oxen, Buck and Bright, the names of 3/4 of all the working oxen in Canada; 2 cows, 2 calves, 3 small pigs, 10 hens, and 3 ducks, and a pretty brown pony; but she is such a skilful clearer of 7-railed fences that we shall be obliged to part with her. Breechy cattle of any kind are great disturbers of public tranquillity and private friendship; for which reason any settler, who values the good will of his neighbours, would rather part with the best working yoke of oxen in the township than keep them if they prove breechy. A small farmer at home would think very poorly of our Canadian possessions, especially when I add that our whole stock of farming implements consists of 2 reaping hooks, several axes, a spade, and a couple of hoes. Add to these a queer sort of harrow that is made in the shape of a triangle for the better passing between the stumps. This is a rude machine, compared with the nicely painted instruments of the sort I have been accustomed to see used in Britain. It is roughly hewn, and put together without regard to neatness; strength for use is all that is looked to here. The plough is seldom put into the land before the 3rd or 4th year, nor is it required. The general plan of cropping the first fallow with wheat or oats, and sowing grass seeds with the grain to make pastures, renders the plough unnecessary till such time as the grass lands require to be broken up. This method is pursued by most settlers while they are clearing bush land, always chopping and burning enough to keep a regular succession of wheat and spring crops, while the former clearings are allowed to remain in grass. The low price that is now given for grain of every kind, wheat having fetched only from 2s. 9d. to 4s. the bushel, makes the growing of it a matter of less importance than rearing and fattening of stock. Wages bear no proportion to the price of produce. A labourer receives $10 and $11 and board a month, while wheat is selling at only 3s., 3s. 6d. or 4s., and sometimes even still less. The returns are little compared with the outlay on the land, nor does the land produce that great abundance that men are apt to look for on newly cleared ground. The returns of produce, however, must vary with the situation and fertility of the soil, which is generally less productive in the immediate vicinity of the lakes and rivers than a little further back from them, the land being either swampy or ridgy, covered with pines, and beset with blocks of limestone and granite, the subsoil poor and sandy. This is the case on the small lakes and on the banks of the Otonabee. The back lots are generally much finer in quality, producing hardwood, such as basswood, maple, hickory, butternut, oak, beech, and ironwood, which trees always indicate a more productive soil than the pine tribe. In spite of the indifference of the soil, the advantage of a water frontage is considered a matter of great importance in the purchasing of land, and lots with water privileges usually fetch a much higher price than those further removed from it. These lands are in general in the possession of the higher class of settlers, who can afford to pay something extra for a pretty situation, and the prospect of future improvements when the country shall be under a higher state of cultivation and more thickly settled. We cannot help regarding with infinite satisfaction the few acres that are cleared round the house and covered with crops. A space of this kind in the midst of the dense forest imparts a cheerfulness to the mind, of which those that live in an open country, or even in a partially wooded one, can form no idea. The bright sunbeams, and the blue cloudless sky breaking in upon you, rejoices the eye and cheers the heart as much as the cool shade